and welcome to the Hiram Connection.
Welcome to episode 3, and today's topic will be choices.
And to begin the conversation, Janice, as you know, I love looking up definitions. So I looked up the word choice. And what it says basically is an act of selecting or making a decision when faced with two or more possibilities. With that being said, can you elaborate a little bit more on what we're going to talk about in regards to choices and the subject, or where we're going with the conversation of choices on tonight's episode?
Well, just basically, choices are made in our everyday life from what we decide we're going to put on in the morning to what we're going to eat, how we're going to react to certain situations. So, overall, we deal with choices every day, every hour of the day, every minute of the day. And I think that we need to focus on the pros and cons of our choices, the consequences that's involved with making a right choice or wrong choice, and how our choices affect ourselves as well as others.
Right. And that topic is just so, it can be so broad because, like you touched on, you can make good, what can be deemed as good decisions, and of course, on the flip side of that, what can be deemed as bad decisions. So, let's talk a little bit about how you can go about, I guess, making the best choice for you. So we won't necessarily say good or bad, but how you can go about making the best choice for yourself.
Making the best choice for yourself. Well, I just think that we need to own our decisions when it comes down to it, and not have other people's perceptions, or rather other people's ideals, affect how we come about those final decisions for us.
Right, or influencing them in any way to try to, I think sometimes, and not to cut you off, but I think sometimes it kind of hit on when you're, when you have people talking in your ear, and as we've talked in previous episodes about that noise, what have you, when you have to make a decision and people are trying to sway you one way or the other, that can kind of get clouded.
Well, when I look at the process of how to make the best choice, for me personally, I have to look at a situation overall. And then for me, what I have to do is I have to figure out what my desired outcome is. And then what am I willing to do in order to accomplish that outcome? And when it comes down to it, everybody's, I guess, family dynamic or everybody's situation is different, meaning that because I'm a parent, I have to think about how my decisions will affect my family unit.
Right.
As if there was someone who was single and they were just responsible for themselves, that's who they would have to be responsible for. Now, you can take into consideration, those extended people, such as your friends, um, co-workers, and things of that nature. But when you're talking about just overall, how the choices or the steps that I take to make the choices for me, you have to think about who that would affect outside of just you. Because that's what a lot of times people don't think of. If I make a decision or if I make a choice, and if I do this or that, then how would it affect?
Right, how would it affect those that are around you? And and I'll say for me, those motivating factors play a huge part of trying to come to the best decision, for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that and I understand, and with us as being when you reference that close unit, for us it was always the Fab Five, but we lost our matriarch last year, so it's us and the young men of ours. So whenever there are some major decisions or what have you, we tend to talk a lot because
Right.
that is just the two of us as far as siblings. And then, I always want to say the boys, the young men, they are an extended version of us. Anyway, I get that. It's about the motivating factors. And I think that's what plays a huge part in you basically taking that step to make the best decision or best choice for yourself and those who may be immediately affected by that choice or those choices.
Right, because I know I don't want to simplify by using this type of example, but say I decide I was one that I like to party a lot, and then I have a child at home, and I turn around and I take the money that I have and I go out and I party with it. I go drink, but I don't pay the light bill, the rent. I don't pay, the gas bill, and then I have a little one at home that can't see, that's cold, frustrated, and things of that nature. So it's not to simplify it, but we just have to decide what is more important and weigh those things out. Right. And then consider those who are affected by the choices that we make. Because sometimes people really don't care. They're just out to do what they do and to enjoy that satisfaction for that small snippet and then live on to the next, the next situation or the next high, that roller coaster ride, and they get off on that roller coaster ride.
So with the example that you use, for instance, of being that person that made a decision to go out and party versus, taking care of your household and your responsibilities or whatever. Let's talk a little bit about bad choices. And when we talk about those bad choices, and we've all made some horrible, what could be deemed horrible bad choices in our life. Everybody's human, point blank, period. Anybody that said they haven't made a bad choice, I don't believe you. So, in making those bad choices, though, I guess one of my questions would be, how do you move forward from making that bad choice once you've made it? I mean, you've made it, it's done, dealt with the consequences, so on and so forth. So, how do you move forward from that? And don't just sit and dwell because you made a bad decision.
Well, you just got to own it. I mean, pretty much. What's done is done. You can't rewind the past. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things I know in my past I would wish I could erase and just was not existent, but you can't. So either you can sit down in the funk and you can dwell on it, or you can accept the choices, the consequences that came across with that choice, and then move on. If you're not around, people that'll support you either way, then you need to reevaluate your circle. That's something that we talked about last week, reevaluating your circle. But, it's just, you just got to own up to it and move forward. You can't just sit and stew because
it doesn't make any sense to do it. And you can have, regrets for whatever that decision or those bad decisions were. But you use that as lessons learned. We always talk about those aha moments. You hear other people that have referenced aha moments. To me, that's what you take them as aha moments, lessons learned. You put that in the book of life, of your life, and then you just press forward. You don't sit and dwell and stew and woe is me, because you can't ever move forward in life if that's where if you stay stuck because of what could have, should have.
Don't stay stuck on stupid.
Right. Well, but you can't, like you said, you can't dwell and you can't stay stationary. You have to, at some point, you own it.
And you got to grow from it.
Cool. Yeah.
I got you.
That is so true. Yeah. So we have dived in a little bit about making bad choices and how you can, how you shouldn't dwell on them and moving forward from them. And also, I think it should be mentioned that you can't allow those bad choices to define who you are. And I think sometimes people do that. Society does that. You allow those bad choices to define who you are. And I don't think that is something that you should do, as we talked about the aha moments and lessons learned. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think people will try to live up to a specific standard that society or other people had set for them. And they use that as a barometer of what's right and wrong. Now, when we all are growing up in our parents' houses and the village mentality in which we learn in our own mini cultural environment of what is right and what is wrong. But when we get thrown out there in the real world, you know, it's we're scrutinized a whole lot more.
Right.
We all have a set of standards and values that have been instilled in us, at least those of us who have been, in a semi-stable to stable environment. We all know what's right and we all know what's wrong. But it's crazy because the real world will try to crucify you if you step outside of what is the norm. So who is to say what quote unquote is the norm? We have to learn, especially in the 21st century, that we need to be able to set our own rules and set our own standards and live by our own code and live by our own ethics. As long as it's not hurting anyone, as long as it's not illegal, as long as it's not putting ourselves or others in danger, we have to learn how to accept and live by our own code and be able to be free enough and comfortable enough and secure enough to live in our own our own uniqueness, our own choices, and be all right with that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We take a large portion of our lives trying to live up to someone else's expectations and to be accepted. And so we are just pre-programmed to say, okay, well, we'll go along with the crowd and we'll be the status quo. But that's not living. That's not expressing who your true self is. You're not exploring, you're not growing. And so
you make choices based off of basically what someone else's or what societal expectations are, and you're allowing yourself to be put in this little box. And I don't think anybody should be put in a box. And I know for me, I'll say that being younger, sometimes I felt like I was being put in a box, and it's like I was comfortable playing in the box and run around all four corners of the box or what have you. But as you grow and you mature and you start listening to your own mind and being in tune with yourself and your spirit and whatever your higher power is, for me, prayers to God allowed me to make choices that were best for me based on that, and not based on someone else's expectations, whether that was family, friends, whoever I was dated or engaged to, or whatever the case was.
You sound upset.
Real sisters, real talk. So, I get passionate about something. No, I am not upset. That was just sharing just a real life moment and real talk about when you have to make choices, and sometimes when you're placed in a box by people or situations or things, and then it's like you're challenged to make decisions based on that versus making decisions that are best for you and what feels right for you.
Well, on that note, we're going to be taking a short break, and we'll be back with more of the Hiram Connection.
Where our topic today is
choices.
And during the second half of the podcast, we're basically going to share individually 2 to 3 pieces of advice about how you can equip yourself to make the best choice for you. So for me, I'll kick it off. The 2 things that I want to touch on, in addition to what we talked about earlier in the podcast, Janice, is one, with choices. I know we've heard that age-old saying, if you think long, you think wrong. So sometimes we can overanalyze those choices, and basically, I feel like what we should do is you weigh your pros and cons of whatever those choices are, and then just make the decision. Don't dwell on it. Don't sit there taking a month or a year trying to contemplate and figure out, what type of choice you need to make. To me, you just, you make a well-informed choice, but just make it. Just don't sit there and overanalyze. And I can speak from experience because I have been guilty in the past of just overanalyzing, when it came time to make a decision. So don't overanalyze. And then I would say the second thing is, for choices, they should always bring about a change. And I think when you make a choice, regardless of if it's good, bad, or indifferent, there should be some type of change that takes place in you, in your thought process, in your actions, and in the way that you handle things in the future. So to me, that would be 2 of the things that I would share in addition to what we talked about earlier. How about you?
My first bit of advice would be to follow your intuition. We all are built with an internal small voice that tells us when something feels right or not. And that's how we gauge how we go about our day-to-day activities. So we don't need to brush that intuition aside. We need to hone in on it. And as I stated, if it doesn't feel right, then don't do it. Secondly, never underestimate the impact of your decision. Make sure that you actually take the time to weigh out what outcomes are beneficial or would affect you negatively. You have to make sure that you weigh those pros and cons that we talked about earlier, because you're the one that has to live with the decision that you make. And also just be considerate of those around you who are going to be affected. And lastly, just remember that everything in your life is a choice. Your happiness is a choice. Your peace is a choice. How effective you are is a choice. So just remember to choose wisely.
We would like to thank you all for tuning into our podcast tonight, and we thank you for your continued support.
We'd love for you to come back next week where we have a new outlook on a brand new topic. So, as we always say,
real sisters,
real talk.
Have a good night.
Thanks for listening.
Bye. The Hiram Connection is all over social media. We are currently on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We would like to thank those who are already following us and encourage those who are getting to know us through this podcast to connect with us, because we are very interactive on social media.